My vision for this program is very simple. Okay, we are going to build the premier football program in the country. Okay, we are not going to talk about it anymore. We are going to be about it.
Howdy, and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone of Good Bull Hunting, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Michael W. Bratton, aka SEC Mike of that SEC podcast. That SEC football podcast. Mike, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Will. I appreciate the invitation. Always a good time to talk some Texas A&M football.
All right, absolutely. I'm excited today because I'm pretty sure in the 3 years we've had this show, you are the first person to come on the show that's outside of A&M. That's a different perspective. So I think that's valuable because we get on here and kind of get bogged down, and we're in our own little maroon colored bubble, and sometimes we're too positive, sometimes we're too negative. So it'll definitely be nice to get an outsider's perspective. I know you don't do much baseball, but shout out to those Aggies for knocking off Oregon this weekend. I was at the game on Sunday night. Thought it was over. I was trying to figure out who was going to pitch on the third game, and we didn't need that. There's a grand slam that went straight over our heads, and it was a hell of a atmosphere and a hell of a game. So
right, and it's all SEC and ACC, right, in the World Series.
That's right, and it's four from each. So
nice.
On our side, it's us. We play Florida first, and then NC State will play. Gosh, who else is over there?
I know Tennessee's in it. I only know that because I went to Tennessee.
That's right. Yeah, and they're on the other side. I'm blanking on who else is. Oh, it's NC State and gosh, I don't know how.
I think Florida State's in there too somewhere.
It's Kentucky. That's who it was. It's their first ever trip to the College World Series for Kentucky. So if A&M
you can
can't
tell
get it
the
done,
two guys talking don't know much about college baseball just by this intro here.
Oh, that's right. But if A&M somehow can't get it done, I'm all in on Kentucky. So that'd be a pretty cool story.
And I'm hoping that's what it's going to be. Different teams, obviously, but that's probably how I envision. I'm not a big college football playoff discusser because I'm
Right.
more about focusing on the regular season. But I just hope that it's like that in football when we get there. 12 teams and about half the field is the SEC. That would be heaven to me.
Yeah. You go 6 out of 12. Everyone's 10-2, and everything just falls just right. But getting into some football talk, we're under 100 days out, and it's going to be here before we know it. A lot of A&M fans are pretty optimistic. I think Coach Elko has come in here real quick and won a lot of us over. But on the outside, like you cover the SEC, and you have seen this from not afar, but not like as a fan, and just the firing of Jimbo Fisher and like how bad things got, under that coaching staff, and then we had Stoops Gate, and then Elko's the guy, and he's done some nice things since. But I guess like from an outsider, like what's the temperature of A&M right now for you?
Well, I can always judge how it's going because I love to troll. I love to talk trash. And for years, a lot of Aggies were like, man, this guy just hates us. Jimbo's our man. And then middle of last season, they said, this guy's right. Like we owe him an apology. And again, not that I'm always right, but I've been kind of out on Jimbo for a while. I think he's been holding A&M back. I think that's clear as day. We don't have to rehash that. Culture was an issue. Talent certainly wasn't an issue. Resources, fan base, atmosphere, stadium, conference, on and on and on. So many things in A&M's favor, but coaching was killing them. So, and that's not even before we get to Mike Elko, who I think was a really good hire. But I think just jettisoning Jimbo Fisher, I think that's going to do wonders for us. I was not a fan with the defensive coordinator DJ Durkin. That was a huge downgrade from Mike Elko. So again, if I'm an Aggie, I'm happy that he's at Auburn now because I don't think Auburn's going to do much with DJ Durkin. He's not. I'm not saying he's like the worst defensive coordinator ever, but it was a clear as day a major step back there. So I think getting rid of him will be positive for us. But yeah, just back to my rambling point there. When the Aggies started coming around, that Jimbo was not the man. I was feeling pretty good about that because it just feels like, and it's not all on him. I mean, there's been other coaches that have failed to live up to expectations, but he was really holding us back with his archaic offense he was running last year.
Yeah, and like, I certainly agree with all that, and it's so weird because it felt like a lot of the same things we're saying about Jimbo we said about Sumlin, and like, oh, like the culture has kind of degraded and broken down, and we're not winning very many games, and but the problem Sumlin had was the talent on the roster had deteriorated quite a bit. Jimbo left a pretty nice cupboard, even with the transfers, going out. There's some nice pieces here. I think Connor Wigman is a pretty underrated quarterback on the national landscape, and I get it. He hasn't played a ton of football. Got hurt last year and only had Miami as the one true opponent that he played against. But I think Aggies are a big believer in him, and there's still some talent on this roster to have a pretty nice first year for Mike Elko. But how about these assistant coaches that he hired? Because we didn't really know like what's Elko's like coaching tree. Like when we hired him here, he'd been with Dave Clawson for a long time, and then was it Bowling Green, Wake, Notre Dame. We plucked him from there, and he was here for a good bit. But I just assumed that he would bring like the whole Duke staff, and he brought a couple guys like tight ends coach, O-line coach, who's got a pretty good reputation. But going out and getting Colin Klein from Kansas State. Talking about the anti-Jimbo, like a very modern and successful offense. It's a pretty nice hire for Elko. No,
yeah, no doubt, and it's compounded by the fact that you took Colin Klein away from his alma mater, where he's having a lot of success. I've seen some projections. Again, I'm solely focused on the SEC. That doesn't mean that I hate the Big Ten or I think Big 12 is garbage, even though I kind of do. But again, I don't follow it, so I'm I'm ignorant to a lot of that stuff. But what I'm seeing is some projections. Kansas State the favorite to win that conference. You just stole their offensive coordinator who went there and played quarterback. So again, it speaks to how attractive A&M is to these coaches and coming up to work for Mike Elko and the talent on hand. So maybe Kansas State, let's say they do win the Big 12. Can they realistically win the national championship? I think Colin Klein's decision probably tells you otherwise. And that's not to say that A&M is going to overnight turn into a juggernaut and win the national championship. But I think he's well aware that they can do that in College Station in the very near future. Again, it may not be overnight, but year 2, year 3, if things progress like they did at Duke when Mike Elko got there, and with the talent they have on hand in College Station, I think that was a heck of a hire. And to your point, we're going away from the offense that was successful in 2014. We're going to an offense that was successful in the 2024 era. So, that was a big one. I'm fascinated to see how it works because, again, at Kansas State, not to diminish that program or anything, but I don't think that they have the receivers or the running backs that they have at A&M, yet they were very successful. So what is this offense going to look like with better athletes, with a better quarterback? And speaking of getting rid of somebody, just thank goodness Steve Adazio is not our offensive line coach anymore. Another addition by subtraction there.
Yeah, and man, that last point, I actually had that written down in my rundown. Probably one of the worst assistant coaches in A&M history, just given the talent to work with, expectations, all that sort of thing. Even in 2021, like when we played Arkansas, that was one of the worst games I've seen an offensive line play, and that was under Josh Henson. But those guys got better as the year went on, and then Henson leaves, in comes Adazio for the last 2 years, and no one ever got any better. They actually got worse from when Henson was here and in those 2 years under Adazio. So with and it's things like that give A&M fans a lot of hope for this season. Is, hey, you went from having a 0 out of 10 offensive line coach to one who's pretty good, like maybe 8 out of 10. And you went from having this horrible offense that everyone knows how to stop to this offense that worked with, a fraction of the talent that you have. So there's all that stuff put together. We know that, it would be very uncharacteristic if Elko fields a poor defense on any team. So especially here with some of the guys that he's got. So there's a lot of positive things here, but
if I could be negative for a second, again, I love being optimistic in the offseason world. Like we were just joking. I mean, there's going to be 10 win teams in the SEC, according to every fan base. But of course, we know that's not actually going to happen. But that where I am slightly concerned, and it's not necessarily has to be negative or anything, but all that you mentioned, guys lost to the portal, guys added via the portal, fitting all those pieces together when you got Notre Dame coming in week 1. Again, I've seen some buzz, Notre Dame top 10. I think that's a joke. I'm sure they're top 25 caliber. I'll give them that. But that point being, that's going to be a tough test. And then week 3, I think Florida's a lot better than people are giving them credit for. I certainly don't think they're like a playoff team or anything. But if A&M was getting Notre Dame and Florida in November, I'd be much more confident that A&M's going to win than getting them week 1 and week 3, just because it is a new regime and there's so much turnover, if that makes sense.
No, it certainly does. And even if the Notre Dame game was week 2, like you have that warm-up game, against McNeese or whoever to kind of get things, like get the nerves out. But A&M doesn't have that. It's right off the jump. This is the first snap that this team takes is going to be against the Fighting Irish. And I think they are pretty good, especially on defense. We'll see how Riley Leonard works with that offense. They've got what's his name from LSU, Denbrock, going up there to head the offense up. So we know he knows how to score points. But yeah, I think the schedule's forgiving by SEC standards, and I think that first month is very critical in those 2 games. I think if you lose them both, it's going to be hard to salvage for A&M fans, because you still got Missouri, LSU, you still got Texas there at the end of the year. It'd be tough if you went 0-2 in that. So I think you got to get at least one of those. Let's actually start with, I guess before we get into that, I heard you guys talking about like some underrated guys and some potential breakout guys for A&M. I guess like when you look at this A&M roster, like what looks like a weakness, and like I'm pretty high on quarterback, defensive line. I'm actually cautiously optimistic about the secondary with some of the guys they got in the portal. But if you could talk about maybe some highs and lows of what you see when you look at this roster.
Yeah, I'm still uncertain about the secondary. Again, I know they've added guys like you just alluded to, but I also think that in the offseason, we kind of overestimate the impact a lot of these transfers will have.
Sure.
A lot of times, and I know it's very easy to look at like Jaden Dales, Joe Burrow, win Heisman's. I'm not saying they're not impactful, but even those 2 examples, it was year 2, right? So again, can you get a guy day 1 and be a solid starter in the SEC? That's difficult. Not saying impossible, but it's difficult. So all the new pieces in the secondary, that has me a little bit concerned. I think defensive line, linebacker, pretty solid. Probably offensive line still. Again, I know we got talent, but I don't know what it is with A&M, but they seem to be cursed when it comes to having a quarterback stay upright, stay healthy, and if nothing else, I mean, you have to point at the offensive line. So can they keep Connor Wigman healthy? I think that'll be paramount. And that I even, that being said, I've got a lot of confidence in A&M's backup quarterbacks too. So I think offensive line, I want to see there, and also maybe at receiver. I like some of the pieces. I think Moose Muhammad, I put him as A&M's most underrated player. Thankfully, now that Jimbo's gone, he can wear his sleeves, and then
That's right.
we won't be sitting people out for ridiculous things such as a tire. But I think that's one, and hopefully we'll see Donovan Green back in the lineup at 100%. Who
For
missed?
sure.
I believe he missed all of last season. Getting
He
hurt in
did.
fall camp.
Yeah.
He looked very promising as a freshman. So I think that's another guy that you could consider underrated, that not a lot of people are discussing heading into this year, but could be a big impact for the first Mike Elko A&M team.
Yeah, and Donovan Green's a guy that every A&M fan loves. He's part of that number one recruiting class of all time. But like, he was kind of one of the culture guys. In addition to his excellent talent, him, Bryce Anderson, Connor Wigman. That was kind of the nucleus that has kept things together. In the firing of Jimbo Fisher and all the turmoil. So we definitely would love to see Green get back on the field and see what he can do. But all right, so there's a team we have to talk about, and I want you to back me up on this, because you went viral, I think, last week for something you said about A&M and something about Texas. But I reached out before you said that, so I didn't bring you on just because of that.
A lot of people did, though. So yeah, credit to you. You were well before.
So the Dave Campbell's football magazine, which is like a summer Bible for anyone that lives in Texas, the cover came out, and of course, with A&M and Texas, getting back together for the first time since I was a freshman at A&M. On the cover is Quinn Ewers and Connor Wigman, and your quote tweet of that image said, "Oh, look, it's a Heisman contender in Quinn Ewers," and that got a lot of people stirred up on Feinbaum. I think you had Feinbaum speechless with some of your takes there, but I've hated on Texas a lot on this show, and they had a terrific year last year, and they've got things going in the right direction. But I guess tell me from your perspective on this, on where A&M and Texas are, in the SEC and kind of in relation to each other.
Yeah, well, let me ask you real quick. I mean, is that because I heard a lot of people got back to me and they were like, "Oh, what a jerk! Like, why are you talking down to Quinn Ewers? Why do you hate Quinn Ewers? Why are you bashing Quinn Ewers?" Find me where I'm bashing him. I said I like the cover, and I just said, "Hey, I like the Heisman contender on there, Connor Wigman." So I don't think that's bashing. Do you?
I don't think so. I think it's because and some of it's his fault, some of it's not. But like, when a recruiting service has you as a perfectly rated prospect, and then you go to Ohio State and then Texas, like, you've got these huge, expectations and whatnot.
Right.
And I'm with you. I really don't think that he's that good. I think that Sark is an excellent schemer and play caller, and he had a bevy of NFL weapons and a great offensive line last season. But you're starting to see, as people look at mock drafts for next year, they're not talking about Quinn Ewers number one, or Quinn Ewers, he's the guy you got to get. Like, they're like, hey, this is the worst quarterback class in years, and so yeah, I tend to agree with you there.
Right. And again, not bashing. I'm just saying.
Sure.
Hey,
Yeah.
But I like Connor Wigman. I don't know what's wrong with that. But again, to your point, yeah, they were loaded at receiver. Texas, we're speaking of now, last season, and they returned the least amount of production at the receiving yards position in the entire SEC. They're ranked 16th. So yeah, I know they rated the transfer portal, but the same thing I said about A&M and their defensive backfield, I'm going to say about Texas and their receivers. That's not to downgrade those guys, but people think this is like a Madden video game or something, and you just, we got a 98, we got a 96, we're golden, but it doesn't work that way. Particularly with a new quarterback, new scheme, new play caller, tougher conference. That's not to downgrade those players, but I just don't think you're going to replace them immediately overnight. I think that's a huge concern. To your point, Quinn Ewers, I mean, a lot of people watched them beat Alabama, and they smashed Bama. At Bama. I mean, that was a historic performance that if I'm a Texas fan, that will live with me forever, as it should. And that was a awesome moment. But we come to find out Alabama wasn't that good at that time, right? I mean, they nearly lost to South Florida the next week. And Quinn Ewers, if he looked like that the entire season, he probably would have won the Heisman. I mean, he played that
Right.
well that night. But the problem is he's not shown that yet in multiple seasons of playing college football. I hope for his sake he shows it this year. But am I going to hope and pray, or am I going to go off what I've seen? I'm going to go off what I've seen, and he is largely inconsistent. He's missed games multiple seasons due to injury. Now, I hope he doesn't get hurt. I'm not saying he's going to get hurt or anything like that, but I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. And again,
Yeah.
what people don't realize, again, I think because of Sarkisian, because of Quinn Ewers, maybe because of the star power at receiver, I don't know, but they get so focused on Texas offense. And it was really the defense was a lot better than their offense last year. And
Absolutely.
their defense lost two elite run stuffers that are now in the NFL, that they simply do not have anyone similar to either one of those guys on the roster. So I don't know. There's a lot of concerns I have about Texas. Now, that being said, I'm not just some hater. I said on national television, I think they'll win 9 or 10 games. I mean, I get it. The over-under's 10.5, but I didn't say they were going to go 4-8 or something crazy, you know?
That's right. No, I think that's fair. And I think that, in today's game, well, and like Texas has always been, it's been easy to hop on the bandwagon. And there's always been a lot of hype surrounding them. I remember, them beating Notre Dame in this instant classic of a football game. And then they go 5-7, and Notre Dame goes 4-8, and none of that even mattered really. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're pretty well equipped to come in here and have a good season. But I don't know who it's going to be. And I look at their schedule, and it's not that tough. But I feel like maybe it's a Kentucky that sneaks up on them and gets them at home, or maybe they go to Fayetteville and Taylor Green is just feeling it and he goes off on them.
Right.
I feel like from week to week in the Big 12, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's not the same as the SEC. There's the gap is a lot smaller from an athletic profile, and like you go play Mississippi State at 11 a.m. with those cowbells, and they got big defensive linemen, and it's a different ball game from going to Iowa State or Kansas or someone like that.
Right. Yeah, and not to mention they play Florida, which again I think Florida's going to be really good. They play Oklahoma and Georgia back-to-back weeks. I mean, there are some rough patches there. Before we get to what I think will be the best game of the entire college football season, Texas at Texas A&M, last regular season game of the. I mean, I simply cannot wait for that game. I can only imagine how your audience how hyped up they are for that one.
Oh yeah, big time. It is. We circled that one as soon as that date came out. But and we knew, like, we've been playing LSU on Thanksgiving. We all knew it was going to go back to being that game. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you have a bet on that game. Is that right?
Sorry, which game now?
On Texas and Texas A&M. If Texas beats us, you have to.
Oh, right. Yeah. If I say so much crazy stuff, I forget. Sorry. But yeah, if Texas wins, I'm going to shave my beard into a T.
Yeah.
I'll do it live on the show. Like I did it last year too, because I bet Alabama would kill them.
Yeah.
And obviously they didn't. So man on my word, I did it. I showed up, and it's funny how you put that out there, it goes viral, and then all these Texas people are like, this guy don't even do what he says. It's like, I mean, it's all over the internet. Like I can't. It's there if you just research it, but no one does the research.
No, they don't. A team that I've been trying to research that I'm so intrigued by is Mizzou, and I think Drinkwitz, he's a great coach. They've got some really good players over there. They're doing a pretty nice job with NIL and transfers, and they finally broke through last year. They won 11 games. Beat Ohio State, in the bowl game. They lost some guys off of that team, especially on defense, but I think they're still pretty well equipped to maybe not win 11 games, but I bet they're still in that 9-10 win range. Is that your opinion?
But yeah, no doubt, and maybe even better. I predicted Missouri. I think will make the SEC championship game. So a lot of I'm not sitting here telling you they're the second best team in the SEC, but they have a path to get there. They don't play Georgia. They don't play Tennessee. Their toughest games are at A&M, at Alabama, and they get Oklahoma at home. If they could go 1-2, they're going to be 10-2. Basically, is the point there. So I think they may have the best offense in the entire SEC even. So yeah, and it's funny, we talk about Jimbo and his faults. We got to credit people like Drink and Kiffin. No, I'm sure he's not a fan of your
He's
either,
not.
but
He's not. But he's done a good job there.
These guys are they're seeing the landscape and they're adjusting to it, and I feel like some coaches aren't, obviously, like Dabo, and that's why his program's crumbling, and others are adjusting, and that's why for the first time in their history, Ole Miss and Missouri are in playoff consideration. Whereas if I said that 5 years ago, that I would have been laughed off this show.
Yeah, and not even like, oh, they can make it, like in a 12 team, but like they can do some damage. Like Mizzou has loaded up, Ole Miss has loaded up, and it's like you said, yeah, like that would never have been thought of, 4 or 5 years ago. So
Right.
It's definitely a tip of the cap to those coaches for adjusting to how things are today and doing a good job. But I'm curious about Mizzou's defense. I listened to a lot of NFL draft podcasts. They all loved Darius Robinson, who's a first-round pick. They love both cornerbacks who are gone. And I think a couple of good linebackers for them have since moved on and graduated and gone to the NFL. But they backfilled some of those. I watched the spring game. Toriano Pride, corner from Clemson, had an interception. They got a couple of D linemen from, I think, one from Florida, one from Michigan State. But and they did lose Blake Baker to the DC to LSU. So are you expecting much of a drop off on that side, or can they keep things kind of at the standard of last year?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just doing research. We just talked about them on our show today. Like you said, Michigan State defensive lineman, Florida lineman Chris McClellan, who's a solid player. Eddie Kelly from Georgia Tech. Darius Smith, he was a 5-star, went to Georgia. Sterling Webb from New Mexico State. They signed the number 1 edge defender in the country, Williams and Awari. And then I really like these 2 linebackers they brought in. Corey Flagg from Miami, 179 tackles, 23 and a half tackles for loss. And Khalil Jacobs, who, not a big name or anything, but he was a starter at South Alabama. Their new defensive coordinator was the defensive coordinator at South Alabama. So you have to assume that Jacobs will slide into some role of production. So, yeah, they did lose a lot, but they have a top 10 transfer portal class, and they got 2 offensive linemen, 2 running backs, and then basically all the rest of their transfers are on defense. So
yeah,
I don't know that they got any like stars via the transfer portal, but I think they got enough guys to shore up some deficiencies, if that makes sense.
Well, and Oklahoma fans are pissed off about losing Caden Green, so I think he could be a pretty good player for them.
Right. That's where the moniker we call him Broklahoma, because they couldn't afford to pay him, I guess. But I don't know. I don't really know, but I like saying it.
Yeah. Well, I guess they saved it all for that defensive tackle because the next team we're going to talk about couldn't afford him, and Brian Kelly put that out there that they couldn't. But LSU, I never can really get a read on in the offseason because it's LSU and they have such an advantage in that state with recruiting and bringing in talent. And I think, and this isn't really talked about a lot, but from a program perspective, like that whole university and state is committed to LSU winning football games. And, they got Scott Woodward over there, who was the guy that hired Jimbo Fisher here. He's, great AD. Brian Kelly is a good football coach, but when you lose the offensive talent they lost, and they have the number 1 offense in the country last year and lost 3 games, and the defense, I don't know how it gets any better than it was. Like maybe, like I know they recruited well on that side. Maybe there's some guys that were, 4- and 5-star players that we just don't know their names yet, but uh, have you got a read on this LSU team? Because I feel like the offense won't be as good and the defense is still going to be bad.
Yeah, if they had defensive players that we didn't know their name, they should have used them last year because they were just awful. I mean, literally the worst defense in a Power 5 level. Just trash. And I love a lot of the hires they made on the defensive staff. I think they did a great job. They got Corey Raymond back too, longtime defensive backs coach there.
Yeah,
Brought him
Bo
back.
Davis.
Bo Davis, defensive line. He's arguably the best defensive line coach in the country. Blake Baker from Missouri, defense coordinator. So these are great hires, but they're not magicians. They're not going to wave a wand and these guys can play football now. You know what I mean? So I think that'll really pay off a year, 2 years down the road, as opposed to right now. I'm right there with you. I don't understand at all any hype going LSU's way other than they got Brian Kelly, who, again, I think he's a little overrated. Particularly if you look at his record against top 25 opponents, it's ugly. So again, I'm not trying to trash everybody I talk about here, but I think they're much closer to 8-4 than 12-0. I really do. So I don't even think they're a playoff contender. I don't get where anybody's putting them in the playoff conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I definitely can't see playoff. And even last year, people were putting them like 5, preseason number 5 going in. I'm like, I don't know. Like it doesn't seem right. But
now I will say I went on Fight Bob last year and I said LSU's going to win the national championship. So I say a lot of crazy things again. But if they had a capable defense with that offense, they should have. Yeah. But they didn't come close to doing it. So
yeah,
I'm an idiot.
It's so strange seeing LSU have a bad secondary because like they've always had just shut down corners and great secondaries and
right.
for whatever reason they just don't have it right now. But so I've got that one circled for A&M obviously, but they play them at home and I do like Garrett Nussmeier. I think he can be a really good quarterback, but losing those 2 receivers that they have, both first rounders, both total studs. Losing your OC, maybe this other guy that got promoted, maybe he's a good play caller as well. But I don't know. I'm trying to be objective, but I think I would favor A&M if they played this weekend. But after that, so I've kind of got Texas, Missouri, LSU as our 3 toughest games, all at home, which is a benefit. But that doesn't guarantee anything. After that, I think a lot of people are high on Auburn because like they have recruited well. I haven't looked at their transfer class. I think they got some decent players, but I can tell you what they didn't get is a new quarterback, and why I couldn't tell you because we all watched Peyton Thorne last season. We watched Robbie Ashford and whoever else, and freshman they got. I think he's a fine prospect, but if you have the receivers and running backs, Jarquez Hunter's a great running back. Why not go get I thought the kid from Liberty was a lock. Salter. I was like, oh, Auburn's going to get him easy. Hugh Freeze coached there the year prior and probably has that relationship, and he just stayed at Liberty. And then they're going to roll with Peyton Thorne. So I don't know. I think it's just perplexing, and I really don't know what they have on defense. I know they lost some guys, but how's your feeling on Auburn right now?
Well, I guess you missed the memo, but Hugh Freeze came out and said, we ain't paying $1 million for a quarterback. Well, no one said you got to shop at the dollar store either, Hugh. I mean, you could go in between here, but no, I'm out on I'm out on Auburn. I like the school. I like the people. I don't like Hugh Freeze. So I try to be objective, but I call it like I see it. He has a losing record in SEC play. Every time someone hears me say that, they think I'm taking away wins that the NCAA removed. I'm not. That's point blank. That's his record. He's a losing record, losing coach. Yes, he beat Alabama twice. He's been living off that for a decade. He also lost to Vanderbilt twice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean,
lost to New Mexico.
New
Mexico State, whoever it was. Yeah.
New Mexico State. Not only did they lose, they got destroyed.
Yeah.
At home, and then they turned around and got destroyed by Maryland, who's, I mean, my God, come on. So
God, I forgot about that.
Again, this is the Hugh Freeze experiment. I mean, he'll lose to Vanderbilt, but he'll beat A&M. You know, I mean, he'll do something crazy like that. Is that a
Yeah.
good coach? I don't think so. I think he's wildly inconsistent. But yeah, I mean, like you said, they did well in recruiting, but to me, it's like they're going through the old way. They're trying to build through high school, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
we'll be good in 3 or 4 years. They're not gonna be patient down there. That's gone with the
Yeah.
portal, with NIL. You have to be competitive immediately. And I'm not saying Auburn's got to win the SEC, but if they win 6 games again next year, he's going to be sitting on one of the hottest seats in the SEC. And a lot of those elite players he signed out of high school, they're probably going to transfer to Georgia. You know what I mean? So good luck with all that. I don't think Auburn is very good at all. No, I think 6, 7 wins at most.
Well, and take it from someone who knows, signing a bunch of 5 stars does not guarantee you success. I can tell you that right now.
Right.
So I think we're on the same page there. Yeah. We play them on the road the weekend before we play Texas, at home, but it's too far a stretch, at this point for me to think that they're going to, end up beating us.
Right.
Now
I
Florida,
believe they are the betting favorite today in that game, but I bet by the time that game arrives, A&M will be favored.
Right. Now I think we may differ here. You said, throughout this show so far, you're pretty high on Florida, and we play them early. We play them in Gainesville in the Swamp. I think it's an afternoon game. It may be a flex. Maybe no, I think it is 2:30. Florida's getting a lot of hate right now, and Billy Napier, he had a really strong recruiting class put together last year. It just kind of fell apart at the seams. They did hold on to DJ Lagway, who a lot of A&M fans were, until that paper came in that he had signed with them, we were still holding out hope. Oh, we're going to flip DJ. He's Elko's going to get him, but they hang on to him. And Graham Mertz, everyone crapped on him last year, and he had a decent to good year for Florida last year. But can Napier salvage this? Because it feels like he's all but fired if you listen to people on Twitter, which you probably shouldn't do.
Well, yeah, take it from someone who all off season I'm saying, hey, watch for Florida. They could win 7. They could win 8 games. I mean, if everything breaks right, maybe even a little bit better. But I say all that, and I also say, well, if they lose to Miami week 1 and Texas A&M week 3, you got to fire him immediately. So, I mean, he's like living life on the edge. You know what I mean? So, I get it. I'm not defending, because he's put up some horrific performance. His team has horrific performances, multiple in both of the years he's been down there. So, I'm not some huge Billy Napier apologist or anything, but I do think that the offense started to come around last year, and nobody wants to hear this, but I believe they were 5-2, and that things were looking good. And then they lost 5 in a row. So I get it. But their offense was looking good during that whole stretch. It was the defense. Defense was atrocious, absolutely atrocious. And they've been saying for about 3-4 years down there in Gainesville, our defense can't get any worse, just like LSU saying that now, but they keep getting worse. So they've got to get that corrected. I think he made at the time, I called it out. I said, he hired this guy, Austin Armstrong, who was defensive coordinator at Southern Miss. Nick Saban hired him to be his linebackers coach. And then like a week later, Florida hired him to be defensive coordinator. And he was like 28 years old, 29 years old. Now, depending on who you talk to, some people say this guy's a genius. He's the next Kirby Smart, Nick Saban. That's great. But his defense, his debut defense was outside of LSU, was the worst in the SEC. So that was a very disturbing hire because Billy Napier was essentially putting his fate in this kid's hands, a guy younger than me. And now he's hired Ron Roberts, who they ran him off after 1 year at Auburn, and he was at Baylor. Dave Aranda was his protege. Dave Aranda's the head coach, obviously. Dave Aranda ran him off. So this is 2 jobs in a row he's got run off. And before that, he was at Louisiana under Billy Napier. So now they're bringing in an established defensive coordinator to essentially coach their defensive core. I mean, it's like boggling my mind just trying to explain this, but that is setting up to be a nightmare too. If their defense is not any better, a guy that is got run out of two straight places, there's probably going to be issues down in Gainesville. So again, I'm being pretty negative, but I just told you I'm high on him. But yeah, Graham Mertz I think is solid. I think Montrell Johnson is one of the more underrated running backs in the entire SEC. They've got some good weapons. Trey Wilson at receiver, he was really good as a freshman. I think he'll be probably the best player they have on offense as a sophomore. It's just that defense, man. They were just so bad. If they can, they don't even have to be good. If they can just be average, Florida's going to surprise some people this year. I really do think. And I know everybody, because here's the problem. Everybody looks at Florida's schedule. I'm not looking at it right here, but I know they play Miami, A&M, and then they get Central Florida and Tennessee and Kentucky. And that's the easy part of it.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that schedule lends itself to perhaps a hot start. And then the back end, they're probably going to lose every damn game again. So, I mean, it's going to be tough to sell that. But again, we sit here all off season and say, well, Ole Miss is going to be good. LSU is going to be good. Florida State, they just missed the playoff. That doesn't necessarily translate year after year. So the back half may not be a murderer's row that we believe it is today. I know I've done a really bad job of hyping up Florida, but I don't know. I just see it's either now or never for Napier. And I just think they always beat Tennessee. Trust me, I'm a Tennessee grad. I don't care where that game's played. They're going to beat Tennessee. I think they'll smoke Central Florida. I think they'll beat Miami. And if they beat their cupcakes, they're already at right there. They're already at 5. If they can just win 1 or 2 more games, I don't think that is that much of a stretch.
Yeah, and this doesn't sound good, but when you take the schedule into consideration, I think 7-5 he's probably safe. That'd be a heroic effort on that schedule.
He may be coach of the year if he's 7-5.
He just might. He just might. So it sounds like offense could still be pretty good. They got some guys there, but it sounds like defense is kind of the question mark. And if that can't come together, then it's going to be bad news for the Gators.
Right. And they bring back a ton in the secondary, a lot on the defensive line. They signed a 5-star defensive lineman, and they had some young linebackers too. So, I mean, again, it's a bad unit, but they're basically all back. So again, I don't know if that's selling you, but they got experience at least.
Is there a bigger, I don't know if you ever listened to the split zone duo, but Stephen Godfrey has a term for when, two coaches on the hot seat play each other. He calls it the anxiety bowl. Is there a bigger anxiety bowl than Miami and Florida week 1? Like the loser of that game is going to want to quit watching football.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I mean, that's one. And thankfully they've already announced they're going to put it nationally televised. So it's going to be an even bigger deal. It's going to be even more of a disgrace forever the fan base. And personally, Florida fans come at me more than Texas fans, and just what little I know of Miami fans, they're awful. So couldn't happen to a nicer 2 fan bases. You know what?
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like Ole Miss and Mississippi State whenever they play at the end of the year. So I think after that, so that's our first for our kind of our hardest 5 opponents. I think there's a clear gap after that with Arkansas, South Carolina, and Mississippi State. Gosh, I was listening to y'all's returning production episode, and Mississippi State has nothing coming back. It is a complete, tear it down to the studs kind of rebuild over in Starkville. I haven't seen their schedule, and I don't even know who they still have on their team, but it's going to be a rough go of it in year 1 for Jeff Levy, huh?
Yeah, first SEC game for State at Texas. Second one, Georgia, I believe. So it's like, oh my, they
don't
did
do any
everything
favors.
they could. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if they make a bowl game, it'd be a miracle, I think.
Yeah, I think so. South Carolina, Spencer Rattler has got a lot of hate over the years. Still probably the best quarterback South Carolina's had in a long time. a couple years ago when they played at A&M, they had to have a GA that had quit football, rejoin the team. I'm pretty sure he played against us that year, and it was a disaster for them.
Right.
They lost Leggett, the receiver. I do like the freak athlete they have. I don't know if he's a receiver, tight end, Nicholas Harbor.
Right.
He made some plays against A&M. It's just like he's truly one of one from an athletic standpoint. But I like Shane Beamer, and I think he's a solid dude and a good coach. But how's that situation in South Carolina right now? Like, can they, I haven't even checked. Like, have they gotten guys from the portal? Like, are they like what's their positives going into this season?
Yeah, they also have don't quote me on this, but I think it's a top 15 portal class. So they signed a number of guys, not a lot of high end guys, but they signed a huge quantity of guys, if that makes sense. Rocket Sanders was kind of the biggest one, former Arkansas running back, led the SEC in rushing 2 years ago. So he's their running back. They really need pieces to emerge at receiver, though. They have, like you mentioned, Leggett's gone, but their coaching staff, I think they do a really good job. And I know last year was a disappointment. You make a bowl game 2 years in a row, you expect to continue that trend, but they got banged up on the offensive line, and it just kind of caved in on them. So I believe there's 3 teams in the SEC: Kentucky, Oklahoma, and South Carolina that bring back more on the defensive side of the ball than any programs in the SEC. So their defense was not elite by any means, but again, if you're second or third in returning production, that's a good indicator that they will improve, and they've got some really good players in the secondary. I think Shane Beamer's problem is expectations at South Carolina. I think it's the old ball coach, went in there and won 3 11-win seasons back to back to back.
Right.
And ever since then, they just kind of expect that. And that's not been in their history. I'm not saying they can't get there. There's no reason South Carolina can't be what Missouri is now. So
that's fair.
I'm not sitting here making excuses for them, but just the expectations are tough, particularly when your in-state rival was winning the conference every year and playing for the national championship. So that it just got compounded. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that I answered your question, but there's a lot of uncertainty with South Carolina. I think they have the right coaching staff. I don't think they have the right players to be, one of the contenders in the SEC. And you could certainly criticize the coaching staff for that, but they have done a really good job the last 2 cycles in recruiting. So help is on the way, if that makes sense. Yeah. And they're another one where I'm not sitting here saying they don't pay players or anything like that, but I don't think they have near the NIL that the top 12, 13 teams in the SEC have. So it just makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah. And I feel like I saw somewhere, heard somewhere, and this is poor preparation on my part, but someone said that they got a quarterback over there that the coaches are pretty excited about, but I can't think of what his name is. I'm not sure if you know offhand, but
probably Lenore Sellers. He's more of a dual threat type guy, and
I think that's who it is. Is he expected to be the starter?
Yeah, so he's a redshirt freshman. Played a couple of games last year, and he looked pretty incredible. Now, he just played in junk time, right? Because Spencer Rattler was far and away their starter. He didn't threaten his job or anything like that. But yeah, and it could be a case. I know this doesn't make sense logically because I agree with you. I think Spencer Rattler, and I crapped on him heading into last year too, but I thought he was one of the top probably 3 quarterbacks in the SEC last year. He just, aside from Leggett, he had no help. Yeah. So he was just getting harassed. He got sacked more than any quarterback in the SEC by a wide margin. But remove him, and I think in a weird way they could get better just because where he was good, and I don't want to say struggled, but he's not a mobile quarterback. And I think their offensive coordinator, Dow Loggins, that's what he needs to run his system, can help protect an offensive line a little bit. So I think their offense overall will be a little bit better, even if they take a slight to do a big step back at quarterback. If that makes sense, I just think it'll be more of a team effort than it was literally Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette last year, and that's all they had.
Yeah, I played college fantasy football, and I had drafted Juice Wells last year because he was like all SEC the year before, and he's hurt and like doesn't really play. Well, this guy Xavier Legette has a great week one, has like double digit catches. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go pick this guy up. Was awesome all year. Like he literally, I bet he was like 50% of their offense. Like it was just like, hey, throw the bottle again. Like he's gonna make something happen. And he's obviously a terrific player, but you can't just have one guy and be successful, because defenses are gonna finally figure it out and adjust for that. But it's never easy playing over there. I've got to give it to them. Their fans, even when things are bad, like they're going to show up still, and they're still going to be loud. Kind of an underrated road venue in the SEC in Columbia. And lastly, I almost skipped right over them, but Arkansas. I know A&M and Arkansas playing in Jerry World, weird things happen. But am I crazy for thinking that we should kind of beat up on them this year?
No, you're not crazy, because about every year I pick Arkansas to win that game, but I'm wrong. So I mean, I got a soft spot in my heart for Arkansas. I'm a big Sam Pittman fan, and I see a lot of Tennessee and Arkansas. Like we used to be good a long time ago, getting beat up by all the big boys. It's like you root for the little engine that could. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I like the Bobby Petrino hire. I'd be kind of curious to hear your thoughts on what he did last year at A&M. But I thought from 2 years ago to last year was a much better improvement, and that's with 4 different quarterbacks you had to play at A&M, because unfortunately they kept getting hurt. So it's hard to go up 11 points per game when you're starting 4 different quarterbacks. But Bobby Petrino managed to do that. I would never consider. I mean, some people they're so lazy. They're just like, is he going to be the next head coach at Arkansas? He about had a losing record at Missouri State.
Right.
Being a head coach is past his time. But I still think he can call plays. I think he can do a really good job with Taylon Green. I've heard from people connected to that program that they think they got an absolute steal in Taylon Green. And they bring back more receiving production than anybody in the SEC. So you have all that. They had a really good tight end last year, Luke Haas. I think he got hurt in the A&M game.
He did. He's a really good player.
Yeah, he was out for the season after that. But before that, he was well on his way to maybe being a freshman All-American. So I don't think there's going to be any shortage of weapons. But the issue with Arkansas's offensive line, they've just been so awful, which is hard to believe considering Sam Pittman's their head coach. They got a new offensive line coach. Hopefully that corrects some of the issues. And then the defense, they started out. I thought they were better than I anticipated they would be, but then at the second half they just couldn't stop anybody. So I don't know. Are they more the first half? Are they more the second half? They have a defensive end, Landon Jackson. He's outstanding. I think he should be all SEC. But one player's not going to make your defense by any means. But
right.
I'm very curious to see, because I thought their defensive coordinator, his name's Travis Williams. He played at Auburn. He was Gus Malzahn's DC at Central Florida. He's solid. So what can he get out of that group? But yeah, I mean, I would certainly think A&M's offense kind of have their way with the Arkansas defense, but I think it's more about slowing down that Bobby Petrino offense, which I think could be a lot better than people anticipate.
Yeah, and I think most A&M fans will be pretty negative about the Petrino experience, but I think if he gets away, like him getting away from Steve Adazio and from Jimbo and like the kind of culture decay that was going on here,
Right.
and just poor O-line coaching. Like when I watched our games last year, I'm like, man, like our offense still kind of sucks. But like you look at the metrics and like, we did score more points per game, and like by the advanced metrics, like it was a vast improvement from the catastrophe of 2022. And I think he did some nice things at A&M last year with having to play 3 different quarterbacks throughout the year. But yeah, I think Taylor Green's a pretty dynamic quarterback. Yeah, especially in the run game. They've got some nice weapons. Those receivers, Luke Haas. I've always liked Jaquindon Jackson, running back from Utah, from Duncanville, up here in Dallas, or in the Dallas area. So I think they got some guys. But yeah, their O-line was great under Pittman those first couple of years. It's really fallen off on defense. Outside of Landon Jackson, I think both linebackers transferred. I know Dwight McGlothern is in the NFL now, and I don't really know what else they have. Kind of, I'm sure they hit the portal hard. They've been doing that, but it's gonna be tough. He's definitely got to get things right and save his job this year. But I think that's it for as far as the schedule goes. But if things come together for Elko and this A&M team, if the offensive line can block, at an average to above average level, and there's not much drop off in the defense, is this team, can they win 10 games with this schedule, or is that too tall of a task?
No, I certainly. I mean, didn't they win 9 games at Duke? His first year. I mean,
That's
right
right.
out of the blue. And again, I know, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for A&M, but yeah, A&M's still got a top 10 roster. They got talent all over the field. I think they've upgraded massively in many aspects of the coaching staff, and you're getting most of, if not all, your critical games at home. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly think I wouldn't sit here and like bet my mortgage on them winning 10 games, but it wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, A&M's one of the toughest teams to kind of predict. And when the over-unders came out at 8.5, and it's not shifted off that, I honestly, I thought people would bet that down, but unless it has recently. But again, I think that speaks to where Vegas is at. 9, 8, 9, and if things break right, get you. I mean, I think most people just assume they're losing to Texas, so I think they're beating Texas. So give me the over and beating that Texas. That, I think that gets you to 10.
We'd love to hear it. I hope you're right. I think we're trying to not buy back in immediately because we were so invested. We invested everything we had into the Jimbo Fisher era, and looked like it was going, first 4 years or 3.5 years with the recruiting class going up and up and up. And then it just all came crashing down. So I think we're a little more reluctant, but so far from everything Elko has, his public appearances, he's saying the right things, doing the right things. We're all very high on him. Before you go, I thought of this the other day. I thought it'd be a fun question. There's only 8 conference games this year, so we're not getting all the matchups that we'd like to see. But if you could pick 2 teams to play each other this year that don't play each other, who would that be? And mine was, I think Texas and Ole Miss would be a super fun football game this year, because they're both, like even potential like top 5 teams, like definitely top 10 teams. But I think Ole Miss versus Texas, for kind of that, maybe for a playoff spot type of thing, I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. How about again, I'm a Tennessee grad. I try not to be like overly homer about it, but I've been dying to see Tennessee, Texas battle for UT.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to see that game for a while. I'm disappointed that we're not getting it even in 2025. So I throw that one into the mix. I think that could be a lot of fun. But another one, speaking of Ole Miss versus Missouri, I think would be a heck of a lot of fun. Like first one to 60 points, kind of like that Ole Miss LSU last year. That was a lot of fun. Of course, not if you like defense.
Which it was not very fun for LSU and their storied defenses they've had in that program. But this, I think A&M's, like A&M fans, we focus on ourselves a lot, and we get the highlights, like the like everyone knows who Luther Burton is at Missouri and things like that. But it's that additional detail that A&M fans aren't always knowledgeable of. So certainly appreciate you coming on and shed some light on some of our opponents. Fingers crossed things work out 10-2. That'd be great. Hopefully you're not having to shave a T into your beard next this coming November, and it'd be all smiles on this podcast. And in College Station. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it very much. We'll try to get you back on before the season starts.
All right, man. Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a good time. Come check us out over at That SEC Podcast. Me and my cousin Shane, he really is my cousin. He's the funniest guy I ever met in my life. So just me and him drinking beer, talking college football. We do it every day.
That I was listening earlier. The question that came in about Little Debbie's, I spit my drink out of that one. I was cracking up on that. So definitely go give them a listen. It's great. Even especially in the off season, because things are about to get pretty dire in the sports world in terms of stuff to watch. So it'll get you through to September. So thanks again, Mike, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Take care.